Ever look at a map and wonder, uh, like, why are some places just so much better off than others?
Yeah.
You see countries right next to each other. Maybe they even share like some history, but one's doing great and the other one is struggling.
Yeah, it's a real head scratcher.
What's the deal with that? What makes the difference? Well, today we're going to really try to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
We're doing a deep dive into this book called Why Nations Fail.
Oh, good one. By Daron, Acemoglu, and James Robinson.
Yeah, that's it. So they're coming at this whole question of like, why some nations are rich and some are poor.
Right.
And they're saying it's not just like dumb luck or, being in the right spot at the right time.
Right, right.
It's not even like having good leaders or bad leaders. They're saying it all comes down to, get this, institutions.
Institutions, yeah. So that's a really key idea in the book. Like when they say institutions, they mean like the rules of the game. How's the whole society set up?
Yeah.
Like the laws, the way the government works, all that stuff that sort of shapes how people actually live their lives.
So the institutions, they kind of set the stage for everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they argue that the kind of institutions you have, those make all the difference. You can't just look at like geography or culture and say, oh, well, that's why this country is poor. They're like, nope, it's the institutions.
Interesting. So it's not like just where you are on the map or like what people traditionally do in your country.
Right.
It's like the actual systems that are in place.
Exactly.
And this isn't just like some random theory, right? I mean, this book has gotten some serious attention.
Oh, yeah.
Like even Nobel Prize winners are like, hey, this book is onto something.
Yeah, like Gary Becker, Peter Diamond, big names in economics. They've praised the book a lot. They say the arguments are strong. The evidence is there. It's like they're saying, look, Acemoglu and Robinson, they've really nailed it.
So they're like the A-team of economics, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And even they're saying, like, pay attention to this book. It matters.
Okay, so the book's got some street cred. But how do they actually make their case?
Well, right off the bat, they hit you with these super vivid examples, comparisons that just make you go, whoa. It's like they're saying, look, see for yourself.
Okay, hit me with it.
All right, so picture this, okay? Two towns, same name,
Yep.
Nogales.
Nogales.
But one's in Arizona,
Yeah.
USA, and the other one's in Sonora, Mexico.
Across the border.
Literally, a fence runs right through the town, dividing it.
Wow.
So same town, same name, same people, basically, like same culture, same background.
Right, right.
But the difference, night and day.
Okay, like what kind of difference? Give me the details.
Okay, so on the Arizona side, Nogales, Arizona, people make way more money on average, way more. Schools are better, healthcare is better. The whole place just looks more, developed. Streets are paved, things work. And then you step across that fence.
Yeah.
Nogales, Sonora, lower incomes, less opportunity, more crime. It's just a totally different scene.
Yeah.
And it's not because the people are different, it's because the systems are different.
Oh, so that's where the institutions come in.
Exactly. The rules of the game are different. On one side of the fence, you've got institutions that promote growth, that protect people's rights, that make it easier to do business. On the other side, it's more about who you know, corruption. It's harder to get ahead. The system's kind of rigged.
So it's like one town, two totally different realities because of these institutions.
Right. And what's crazy is when you talk to people in Nogales, Sonora, they get it. They see the difference. They know it's not just about like, oh, we don't have enough resources or something. They say it's the way things are run, the lack of opportunity, the corruption. That's what's holding them back.
Wow, so they're like living proof of the book's argument.
Exactly. It's not just a theory. It's playing out right there in that town, split by a fence. And then the book takes us to another really powerful example, Egypt.
Egypt. Okay, so what about Egypt?
Remember the protests in Tahrir Square
Yeah.
back in 2011? Like the whole Arab Spring uprising?
Yeah, that was huge news.
Right. So people were fed up. There was so much corruption, oppression. The economy was a mess. And the book, it actually gives voice to these regular Egyptians. People like Noha Hamad, she was a young worker.
Yeah.
And Mozab el-Shami, he was a student.
Okay.
They talk about what life was like under that regime, like dealing with the corruption, the lack of freedom, the bad education system.
Right.
And what's really interesting is when they talk about what they want, what they're protesting for, it's not just about like, oh, we need higher wages. They want something much bigger.
Like what?
They want an end to the corruption. They want real political rights. They want a government that's accountable to the people.
So they're going for like systemic change?
Exactly. They see that the whole system is broken. Like even Mohammed el-Baradei,
Hmm.
he tweeted at the time, it was like a warning. He said, all this repression, lack of justice, blocking peaceful change, it's a ticking bomb, he said.
Wow.
So you've got these regular Egyptians, they're risking their lives to protest, and they're saying, look, the problem isn't just that we're poor, the problem is the system itself is rigged against us.
So they're connecting the dots between like their economic situation and the politics, the
Yeah, right.
institutions.
They're like, we can't have a good economy unless we have good institutions.
Interesting.
And it's not just them, it's like the whole movement. When they actually put down their demands, like on paper, 12 points, 12 immediate demands, every single one was about political reform.
No economic stuff at all.
Not in those first 12. They were all about getting rid of the dictator, having free elections, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And then later, they added in stuff about like, okay, we need a higher minimum wage, better jobs, all that. But it was like, first things first, we need to fix the system itself.
That's a powerful statement. So we've got Nogales, we've got Egypt. What else does the book throw at us?
Well, they go way back in history, like centuries back. They look at the Spanish conquest of the Americas.
Oh, wow. So like conquistadors, Aztec empires, all that.
Exactly. So the Spanish, they come to the Americas and they find these incredible empires, the Aztecs, the Incas, and they're like, whoa, look at all this gold, look at all these resources. But their goal wasn't to build up these societies. It was to extract, to take as much wealth as they could and ship it back to Spain.
Right. So it's like plundering.
Yeah, they were all about that gold and silver. They even melted down like incredible works of art just to turn them into bullion. And they set up these systems, these institutions that were all about control and extraction.
Okay. So they created institutions that were actually designed to exploit the people and the resources.
Right, like the encomienda system, where the Spanish crown granted these conquistadors control over indigenous labor.
Oh.
So they had a system in place that basically forced indigenous people to work for them for nothing. It was brutal. And then there was the Mita system, which they kind of adapted from the Incas, but they made it way harsher. They forced indigenous people to work in these silver mines. Potosi was one of the big ones, under these horrible conditions.
So they basically just took over these existing systems and made them even worse.
Exactly. They tweaked the institutions to make them more extractive, to benefit themselves, the Spanish elite, at the expense of everyone else. And the thing is, those choices, the way they set up those institutions, it had this ripple effect. Like it shaped the entire trajectory of those societies for centuries. Even today, you can see the legacy of those extractive institutions in the inequality and poverty in parts of Latin America.
Wow, that's pretty heavy stuff. So the Spanish were all about extraction. What about the English? Weren't they doing kind of the same thing in North America?
Well, yeah, at first they thought they'd find tons of gold too, like the Spanish did, and they wanted to exploit the Native Americans for labor. But it didn't quite work out that way.
Why not?
Well, the situation was different. The Native Americans in North America, they weren't organized in these huge empires like the Aztecs and the Incas.
Right, right.
There wasn't all this readily available gold lying around. So the English, they had to adapt. Like Captain John Smith. Remember him?
From Pocahontas.
That's the one. He wrote this famous letter where he's basically like, hey, stop sending us all these gentlemen adventurers who just want to get rich quick. Send us some people who can actually build stuff, like carpenters, farmers, blacksmiths.
So they needed practical skills, not just greed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They realized that to survive, they had to work, to build something, not just try to grab whatever wealth they could find.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, and it led to some pretty different institutions. Like at first, the Virginia Company, they tried to control everything. They had these really strict rules. They were punishing people harshly if they didn't work hard enough, but it wasn't working. The colonists were like, no way. We're not going to bust our butts if we don't get something out of it.
They wanted some incentive.
Right, and eventually, the Virginia Company had to give in. They introduced this thing called the headright system.
Headright system? What's that?
It was basically like, hey, if you come here and you pay your own way, or you bring other people, we'll give you land.
Oh, so they're giving people a stake in the game.
Exactly. He created this incentive for people to invest, to work hard, to build something for themselves. And then they also established the General Assembly, which gave the colonists some say in their own government.
So they had some political power, too.
Yeah, it wasn't perfect, but it was a step towards more inclusive institutions.
Interesting. So we've got all these different pieces now. Nogales, Egypt, the Spanish, the English. How does it all fit together? What's the big takeaway?
Well, it's all about the institutions, right? Like that's the core message of the book. The kind of institutions you have, They determine whether you get stuck in poverty and stagnation or whether you have a chance to prosper.
Okay, but what makes an institution good or bad?
Well, they talk about two main types: inclusive institutions and extractive institutions.
Okay, I'm guessing inclusive is good, extractive is bad.
You got it. Inclusive institutions, they spread the power around, they protect people's rights, they make it easier to start a business, they encourage innovation, they create a level playing field where everyone has a chance to get ahead. And that leads to what they call a virtuous cycle.
Virtuous cycle. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, it's like things just keep getting better. People are more productive, they invest more, the economy grows, everyone benefits. But then you have extractive institutions.
Which are the bad guys.
Yeah, those are the ones that concentrate power and wealth in the hands of a small elite. They don't care about the rights of the majority, they just want to extract as much as they can. And that creates a vicious cycle.
So it's like a downward spiral.
Exactly. It's like the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, there's no opportunity, no incentive to innovate, and the whole society stagnates. And you see that playing out in the examples we talked about.
Right, like Nogales, Sonora, with the corruption and lack of opportunity.
Exactly, and Egypt under that oppressive regime.
Yeah.
And then the Spanish conquest, they set up these extractive institutions that plundered the wealth of those empires and left a legacy of inequality that still exists today.
And then the English in North America, they kind of stumbled their way into more inclusive institutions, which eventually led to, well, the United States.
Right, it's like a totally different path. And it all comes back to those initial choices, those institutions that were put in place. And it makes you think, like, what about today?
Yeah, what about the world we live in now?
Are there things happening right now, maybe seemingly small things, that could have these huge long-term consequences?
It's like what kinds of things?
Well, think about it. Are there countries that are becoming more extractive, maybe concentrating power in the hands of fewer people, eroding democratic institutions? Are there places where the rules are being rewritten to favor certain groups over others? Those are the kinds of things that could set off these vicious cycles, leading to poverty and instability down the road.
That's a sobering thought. So it's not just about looking at the map and seeing who's rich and who's poor. It's about understanding the systems, the institutions that are driving those outcomes.
Exactly, and recognizing that those systems are man-made. They're not set in stone. We can change them. But we have to be aware of the consequences of those choices, the kinds of cycles they might set in motion. That's the real power of this book. It makes you think about these things, it makes you question the way things are, and it makes you realize that we have the power to shape our own destinies.
Wow, powerful stuff. Well, listeners, there you have it, our deep dive into why nations fail. Definitely a lot to think about. Go check out the book if you want to explore these ideas further. And in the meantime, keep your eyes open. Pay attention to those institutions, the rules of the game in your own country and around the world. Because as we've learned today, they really do matter.
They really do.
All right, that's all for this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep learning.
See ya.